I think most people here will remember the close bereavements they've had, whether they were, as you say, untimely or in other ways, very clearly indeed. It's something that fixes itself in an extraordinary way in the mind. I can remember every moment of the process of our daughter's death. What were the first, how do you describe your emotions and feelings in the first few days?
When Josh died, our world changed in the blink of an eye. Everything was different. And the shock and the trauma are inexplicable. Words don't suffice, I don't think, to describe the pain, the shock, the disbelief. There must be a mistake. But of course, we had to somehow keep on breathing and we had to somehow keep on moving. And actually, in that initial moment, we didn't want to. I know I didn't want to. And Jimmy was, I thought he died in front of me because he collapsed. What happened after that was that we sort of huddled together as a family and we realized we were going to have to create a funeral for our Josh. We realized we were going to have to explain to our other children and support Josh's friends in saying goodbye to him, in believing that this had happened.
It's very interesting you talk about what his friends said and about laughing. I remember on the day of our daughter's death, two friends of ours drove up from Paris. We were living in France at the time, picked us up and drove us back and took us to supper to eat a meal. It was the evening with the chaplain of one of the English churches in Paris, who was a close friend, and his wife and two other close friends. And I remember that evening, like you, it was half tears and it was half uproarious laughter. Yeah. I mean, does that ring any bells?
It does, certainly does. I mean, I'm not saying on the first day, but because we had to.
Not the first.
I mean, it was two weeks to organise the funeral because that was the time slot that we had. But I remember that when we came home from the funeral, we were all totally wrung out.
Yeah.
Totally and absolutely wrung out. Sat on the sofa, turned on the telly, and watched Mamma Mia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
That was it.
And sang along to it.
And Mamma Mia is not
actually, that would have finished my family off. Yeah, no, they couldn't have survived that. I mean, this is a very commonplace thing, but lots of people here will have experienced it. What did you find helpful and unhelpful in people's behaviour? Not so much immediate family, but others who weren't so close, work colleagues, that kind of thing.
On hindsight or?
At the time and in hindsight.
At the time, this is very different. At the time, and what helps now is very different, but at the time what was remarkably helpful was that food didn't factor in. And we kept going to our front door and finding casseroles of food.
That's right. Yes.
And it was like, I don't know if we ate the food, but all I know is something happened. I think the food came in. I think we ate it. I think we might have put the casserole back outside again. It kept coming. Our community gathered around us. And that was really special. And it made us feel held when we were so fragmented and so in pieces. There was something about that containment, which is also what people have said about Josh's funeral. It was containing.
I mean, I think we were quite lucky that we lived in a small village with quite a close network of friends who had been used to providing for each other various different events, whether or not they were marriages or birthdays or weddings. Like, for instance, it was more or less the same crew that had organised and put on the event for our wedding 3 years previous, that then turned up for Josh's funeral with the musicians, the people who were doing the flowers, the people who were doing the cooking. I mean, it was just amazing the way in which just people just gathered together and took on... they made it their own as well, which is another thing that was helpful for us. The fact is that we, Philip mentioned earlier on, that this is really about we are not alone. And from the very from the very first, we knew that we weren't alone. It's not as if people were necessarily supporting us because they wanted to support us. They wanted to be part of our grieving process.
I think that's an incredibly important point. And it's never really occurred to me. That's my first big learning, which I know I'll learn a lot this afternoon. But they allowing people to take part in the grieving process. And they incidentally help you, and you incidentally help them.
We went through, and it doesn't matter whether it's 20 years ago, 30 years ago. In the moment, there's always that sense of rawness, but it gets less brittle around the edges with the passing of time. And, just talking about our darling Josh today, it hurts, but it doesn't hurt like it did back then. But it will never stop hurting, and I'm okay with that. And I wonder if you're okay with that.
Oh, yes. I mean, I would hate it not to hurt, because somehow that would mean you'd forgotten it.
Exactly.
And I always say, it leaves a huge hole in the road of your life. You don't want to fill the hole in. You want to mark it clearly, though, so you don't fall into it the whole time.
Instinctively, when someone dies, I think you want to run and you don't want to ever stop, and you're running in the wrong direction. But grief can be a beast, and it will catch you. It will always catch you. And the problem is it might manifest with physical symptoms, psychological symptoms. Why are we having panic attacks? Well, there's nowhere for the grief to go. There's nowhere for the pain to go. And it's like a suitcase. If you keep putting stuff in it and sitting on top of it, it will burst open. There comes a point when you've got to go in there and you've got to grab a few T-shirts, chuck them away, fold things differently, and find some way of moving on. And I'm not saying that that can happen initially in the early stages of grief, because in the early stages of grief, if you can get out of bed and take one step and one breath, that's enough. That's good enough.
We found a number of people who just had no idea what to say or do. And I think that's probably very common everywhere. Everybody's terrified of saying the wrong thing. It's actually really difficult to say the wrong thing. Saying nothing is definitely the wrong thing. To share in the grief, or even just say, I was so sorry to hear your news. It's inadequate, but it's a heck of a sight better than a stony silence.
Or crossing the street.
Well,
crossing the street. Oh, I do remember that one.
You remember that one?
Oh, I remember seeing friends cross the street.
But we know that people are well-intentioned, but in the early stages of grief, there's nothing well-behaved about it. I mean, I was so angry. I lost quite a lot of friends. I've made some new ones since then, but I was so angry at people who would say, well, maybe he's in a better place, or he won't suffer, or
don't give
things
answers.
Were meant to happen. Some things, no, they're not meant to happen.
The way you advocate the idea of healthy rituals to make the death of someone more real and to enable the grief, I suppose you use the word contained, in a healthy way. Because there's healthy grief and there's unhealthy grief, in my experience. And I remember going through both. How do all those fit together? The Good Grief Project, the rituals, what sort of things are these? And what would you say to people here there'll be plenty of people who the agony is just intense?
The reason why we started the charity is to help, first of all, to help us. As a result, we help other people. But I'd like to go back to a sense of what, in a sense, what the motivation, what the ethos is behind our work, which is, and you mentioned the hole that has been left by your daughter's death. Obviously, we have that, what we call a void in our lives, right? What we've discovered over the last 12 years is that when we are making new things, whether or not it's a daily ritual or something more substantial that's going to last a longer time, like a film, like a book, like a photograph, then they are, those are the things that start to fill that void. And that what we have discovered effectively is that grief, almost by definition, is a creative process. That everything that we do as a result of Joss's death, as a result of what our lives are now, are things that wouldn't have happened if he had not died.
Yeah, that rings a lot of bells.
Yeah.
There's something about the sort of intentional, active opting in to grief.
It was Joanna's birthday last Sunday, as she'd been 41. And it always catches us. Yes. But one of the things we say is for big anniversaries, days, Christmas, attack the day or the day will attack you.
Absolutely.
And I love the idea of grief as a beast. You've got to have it under control.
Yes.
I remember we were in Sainsbury's getting some food for our Joanna Day celebration. And the kids were all small and they were milling around, 5 other kids. The nice lady doing the checkout said, "Oh, you've got a big family. How many children are there?" And without hesitation, our eldest said 6, but the elder one died and she's with Jesus in heaven. The poor lady at the checkout had no idea what to do. But for them, it was just, yes, Joanna's part of the family. Yes. She's not gone.
But, I can tell you the flip side of that, because I remember not long after Josh died, being back in London where we used to live, and I saw one of the parents of one of the kids who was at school with Josh, and she said to me, "How's Josh?" And I went, "He's fine." And do you know why I did that? I did it because I didn't want to pick them up. It wasn't about me.
Oh, absolutely.
I just thought, I'm here in London. I need time out from my grief somehow, just for a moment. Yeah. And that's where people can help us or help themselves, just by stepping up, like everyone in this room today has stepped into this room.
Absolutely.
Everyone in this room will have a level of discomfort. Why wouldn't we right now? The point is, we need to be brave, and that's why I think today is brave. I really do. I think you're brave for
I don't. I think I'm privileged.
But being a bereaved parent does give you a certain amount of courage, because you reach the point of thinking, well, who gives monkeys?
That was very restrained.
It was. Did you notice that?
11 years in the oil industry, there's not much you can say that would shock me.
Though. I'm glad you picked it up.
I was wondering what was coming there.
I just wanted to... Oops.
Just listening to you for 20 minutes, I've learned a huge amount. I'm sure everyone else has. You are an amazing couple. You've really thought this through. Thank you very, very much to both of you. I'm really, really kind of you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.